In this video, I'm just gonna go through what I think is good with acrylics, what's probably pretty bad with acrylics, and sort of the ugly part. The good, the bad, the ugly. Acrylics version. Let's start with
the good.
Acrylic paint is basically a polymer and water solution mixed with pigment. The key thing to understand is that it dries through evaporation. So the paint dries from the outside in, which is why sort of a skin can form on the surface very quickly while the paint underneath is still wet. You can see this when a blob of paint on your palette is drying. If you poke a hole in that outer skin, there's usually some fresh paint still in there for a while. This fast-drying nature of acrylics is the biggest advantage for me. It lets me paint in quick, short sessions. I like to paint in spurts of an hour or two here and there. And each time I come back to the canvas, it's usually bone dry and ready for the next layer. Be aware of the sort of in-between sticky phase. So the paint isn't fully dry, but it isn't wet either. So trying to paint over it with thin, watery layers can actually lift the sticky paint off. When I hit this phase, I either switch to thicker paint or just step away and let it dry completely. Another big advantage to acrylics, for me at least, is the freedom in layering. So I can be thin or thick without worrying about underlying layers. When it comes to oil colors, you kind of want to follow the fat over lean rule. So using more oil in your upper layers to prevent cracking. And with acrylics, that rule doesn't exist. You just paint. And finally, the convenience of using acrylics. I can use water to both thin the paint and clean everything up, and it doesn't smell or need any harsh solvents. But while using water as our sort of main solvent is a huge advantage, it's also the source of some of the biggest challenges with acrylics.
The bad.
The fast drying time that's great on canvas is one of its biggest flaws when it comes to having the paint on your palette. If you're not careful, you'll mix your paints and half of them will be useless before you even get them on the canvas. My solution to this is you just have to sort of find ways to control your environment where you keep the paint on your palette. You basically need to buy yourself more time. I made my own setup. I use a simple glass palette, just a glass from a cheap picture frame, or you can get it from someone cutting glass. And I place it inside a shallow airtight food container, and this keeps the moisture in. And when I lay out my paints, I also mix in about 30 to 40% of slow drying medium. I use one from Winsor Newton that I like, but I know other brands have similar products as well. This combination, plus just spritzing the palette with water every now and then, like once a day basically, it gives me a much longer working time on the palette, but not necessarily that much longer on the canvas. Water and acrylics can be really harsh on your brushes. Bristle brushes in particular, which I love to use, but they seem to hate water. The real problem or danger is that the watery paint travels deep into the brush's ferrule, the sort of metal part, and it's almost impossible to clean it out 100%. So paint slowly sort of builds up in there and dries until the bristles get all wonky and spread out. And honestly, I've just come to accept that my bristle brushes won't last as long with acrylics. But the main thing is sort of discipline. You have to keep your brushes wet while you're working and clean them thoroughly immediately after you're done. Don't let the paint dry in there. Sometimes I even just leave them in the water overnight. Which maybe, I don't know if that's good or bad. It's probably really bad for bristle brushes, but at least the paint doesn't dry in there. A huge issue with acrylics is it's often the first medium people try because you can find it cheap. But I would argue that because its limitations are so harsh, it can be a really tricky medium to learn with. There's a lot of bad paints out there, that you probably should stay far away from. Bad quality paint can be really frustrating. The pigments are weak. It won't mix and make the colors you would expect sometimes, and it would just put up tripwires around you while you're trying to learn. Do yourself a favor and buy proper artist grade paint. Yes, the tubes can get pretty expensive, but the pigment load is so much higher that you'll actually use less paint. Everything becomes more predictable, from color mixing to consistency, and this is key when you're learning.
The ugly.
So one of its biggest ugly issues is that acrylic paint dries darker than it looks when it's wet. And this happens because the white polymer binder turns clear as the water evaporates, revealing sort of the pigment's true darker value. And it makes color matching a real challenge until you learn to sort of anticipate this. It's not a huge value shift, but it's for sure noticeable. So my solution to this is just I paint in stages usually. So I often do a full underpainting in just neutral grays. I use the pre-mixed grays from Golden, which saves a lot of time and hassle. I map out all my values, and when I have my underpainting at a stage where taking it further would just mean like finishing the paint, I switch to color instead, trying to match the underlying values. And it's not like foolproof, but it lets me focus on one thing at a time. Another solution is to just pre-mix your values. So try to mix 2 or 3 value steps of each color on your palette. Sometimes I even like mix 5 before you start painting. That way you're not trying to eyeball value shifts on the fly. You can just grab from your pre-mixed piles. And I often use both of these methods when painting. Another common critique is how acrylics can look when they're dry, like a bit plastic, because, well, that's what it is. It doesn't have the same natural luster as oil paint, and this is most obvious when you apply it thick, in my opinion. Varnish can be a good way to work around this. You can choose matte, satin or gloss varnish to sort of unify the finish and give the painting some added depth and luster. This usually solves the plastic look for me. If I'm not using varnish, it's because I just like how the painting looks at this stage and want that sort of matte watercolorish texture and finish.
To me, painting is as much about the physical act of doing it as in seeing an empty canvas turn into something that I sort of envisioned in my mind. And so the whole process of painting and sort of how I get to paint is super important, at least to me. Like, that's the fun part, right? So I need to do it in a way that's fun for me. And that's probably why there are so many different mediums out there, actually, now come think of it. And I've seen incredible paintings in all kinds of mediums, you know, like egg tempera, acrylics, oil colors, pastels, collage, you know. It's not about what medium you use. It's just like, how can you get where you want to get with whatever you want to create, right? And I think if we have like a joyful experience getting there, it should end up in the painting, right? Or in the whatever we're creating. It's hugely important to have fun while creating. Maybe someone no, it's about struggling. Yeah, maybe. And I guess I kind of do when I paint with acrylics as well. It's not a straightforward process. It's a lot of trial and error and iterating. But that's also what I think is fun. So yeah, find your medium. Try them all and just stick with the one that sort of speaks to you. Feel free to leave a comment. Maybe you have a medium you think I should try that might fit my brain wrinkles. and or just you want to see me struggle with a medium, maybe. Tell me about whatever medium you're using and like why are you using that medium? That would be really interesting. And yeah, like and subscribe, all that stuff. See you in the next one. Where did I put my tea? There we go.